My name is Sharon, and at 37, I've already made up my mind. I knew what I wanted, and I built my life step by step so that no unexpected turn would unsettle me. I worked as a senior project manager at Lancaster Investment Group, one of the largest investment companies in the city, and over 8 years of hard work, I earned a place among those who managed multi-million-dollar deals. I knew what it meant to stay in the office until midnight, wake up with a sore back after 3 hours of sleep, and go back to work because money, reputation, and success were at stake. But last year, my efforts finally paid off. I bought my dream apartment in one of the most prestigious residential complexes, Westlake Towers. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, which reminded me of what I was working for. In the evenings, I sat in an easy chair with a glass of wine, looked at the lights of the metropolis and felt quietly proud of myself. I did it. 6 months later, I added to my achievements the car I had long dreamed of, a new Mercedes, elegant, powerful, and perfectly suited to my lifestyle. Every time I got behind the wheel, I felt satisfied. This comfort, this speed, this confidence, all this was the result of my decisions, my nighttime work, my determination. The financial stability that I have been striving for so long has finally allowed me not only to live my life for my own pleasure, but also to help my family. Parents were the first to notice the changes. "Sharon, dear, your father and I are having mortgage problems," Mom said during one of our traditional Sunday dinners. "Payments continue to grow, and his back hurts more and more." She didn't ask directly, but I got the hint. They had done so much for me in their time, and now I could thank them. I took over their mortgage, and then the utilities, to make it easier for them. My younger sister Melissa needed help too. At the age of 29, she worked as a graphic designer, but her salary barely covered her expenses. "I hate asking," she muttered one day at lunch, picking at a salad with a fork. "But Jake and I are having rent problems. The apartment is perfect, but we can't afford it yet." I did not hesitate. "Of course, I will help." I paid for their housing, and even though the amount was quite a lot, my income allowed me not to worry about it. My weekdays were filled with work, and my weekends were filled with rare moments of relaxation or reviewing new projects. Every other Sunday, I came to my parents for dinner, where Mom treated us to her famous stew, Dad shared the latest news about the neighbors, and Melissa enthusiastically showed off her new design work. It was a calm, measured life, in which everything was in its place. But then there was a trip to Costa Rica. 2 weeks off after grueling months of working on the Sanders Company merger. I gave it my all and deserved a break. White sand beaches, warm ocean, tropical fruits, cocktails and, most importantly, no work. I turned off my work email, promised myself not to answer my phone and just enjoy the moment. But I didn't expect to meet Michael. He stayed at the same resort and, like me, traveled alone. I noticed him during my second night at the hotel. He came into the bar and sat at the counter, a little away from me. Tall, with dark hair that was starting to turn silver at the temples, with slight wrinkles around his eyes. Not a movie star appearance, but attractive in a natural, calm way. "Is the seat taken?" "What is it?" he asked, nodding at the empty bar stool next to me. "Not anymore," I replied, smiling a little. 1 drink turned smoothly into 3, and the conversation turned out to be surprisingly easy. We talked about everything and nothing, about work. He turned out to be an architect, about cities. He was from Seattle, about favorite books. Time flew by, and before I knew it, we were already walking along the beach under the stars. We spent most of the rest of our time together, as if realizing that we only had 2 weeks, and in those 14 days we needed to soak up as much warmth, lightness, and carelessness in each other as circumstances allowed. We walked through the rainforests, where the sun broke through the crowns of huge trees, flooding the damp, moss-covered paths with golden light, where leaves rustled in the shade from monkeys flashing between the branches, and somewhere in the distance the cries of exotic birds echoed. We swam with masks and snorkels in clear water, soaring over coral reefs, watching the leisurely gliding of bright fish and tossing back heavy hair wet from the salty ocean. We drank a little too much over long dinners at a restaurant on the beach, where the waiters already knew our preferences and brought us another glass of chilled white wine while we laughed, discussing books we would never read or cities we might never travel to. And he stayed with me at night. It wasn't love, and we both knew it too well to be under any illusions. It was just a mutual desire, a need for intimacy that seemed natural and right in this isolated corner of the world. We didn't need promises, we didn't need plans. We just enjoyed each other's company, knowing that in a few days our paths would separate. And when that moment came, when the suitcases were packed and the transfer was already waiting at the hotel entrance, we kissed goodbye, without drama, without regrets, without words that could change anything. I returned home and threw myself into my work. My days began to consist of endless meetings, reports, calls, presentations, and late nights at the office. I tried not to think about Costa Rica, not to remember that vacation, not to replay his voice, laughter, and look in my head. It was nice, but it was over, and I had my life, my career, my stability. But 3 weeks after returning, I started feeling morning sickness. At first, I didn't think much of it, blaming it on fatigue, overload, and stress. I didn't let myself get sick, I didn't let weakness get the better of me, so I just ignored the symptoms, drank more water, ordered lighter meals, and tried to switch to something else. But as the days passed and my period didn't start, I had an unpleasant feeling. That evening, returning from work, I turned into a pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. At home, locked in the bathroom, I looked at the wand in my hands, waiting for the result, and felt my fingers tremble. 2 pink stripes. I couldn't believe it. I did a second test in the morning, then a third, and they all showed the same thing. I, Sharon, am 37 years old, financially independent, successful, clearly following the planned path, pregnant. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the test, and I couldn't believe that this had happened to me. It wasn't just unexpected, it didn't fit into any of my life plans. I didn't have a partner, I didn't build a family, I never consciously thought about children. But now that fact existed. I couldn't change it, I couldn't undo it, I couldn't erase it. I had 3 options: terminate the pregnancy, try to find Michael, although I had no number, no last name, no idea where to look for him, or accept it. I tried to imagine what my life would look like if I left the baby. I weighed the pros and cons, making lists of arguments in my head, but when the first shock passed, I suddenly realized that something like warmth was gradually growing inside me. I could afford it. I had a good job, a stable income, an apartment, a car, and the opportunity to provide not only for myself, but also for my unborn child. When it was time for another family dinner, I had already made my decision. All the way to my parents' house, I rehearsed what I would say. I told myself that this was a conscious choice, that I was 37, that I was financially independent, and that I was fully capable of raising a child on my own. I tried to imagine their reactions, anticipated their questions, but I still felt anxiety building up inside. Mom greeted me at the door with the usual hugs. "You're late," she said reproachfully. "Dinner is almost ready." We sat down at the table, started pouring soup, passing dishes to each other. The conversation flowed as usual, gossip about the neighbors, news from work, minor domestic complaints. I barely touched my food, tensely waiting for the moment when I could say what was on the tip of my tongue. When Mom brought dessert, I finally took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. "I'm pregnant." About the 7th week. The silence that followed was so heavy that it seemed to weigh on my chest. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. The father froze with a cup of coffee in his hand. Melissa's eyes widened. "But who's the father?" My sister spoke first. I explained about Michael, about the vacation romance, about the fact that we hadn't exchanged numbers. So you got pregnant by a random guy and he just disappeared? Melissa stared at me, her voice harsh. He didn't disappear, I met her gaze. We both knew it was just a vacation. Sharon, Mom said my name slowly, as if savoring every sound, considering how best to choose the words so as not to cause a storm of emotions. Have you considered all your options? I immediately understood what she was getting at, and something inside me tightened painfully. I nodded, feeling a cold wave of irritation rising from somewhere deep inside, but I pulled myself together and answered evenly. I've been thinking about this a lot. My father had been silent up to that moment, but now he shook his head, pushed away the half-finished cup of coffee and, looking directly at me, spoke slowly and clearly, as if explaining to me a simple truth that I could not understand. Sharon, think about what you're saying. You're 37, you're single, your career is stressful, and now is not the time to have a baby. Especially in this situation. Your father is right, Mom immediately picked him up, clasping her hands in her lap. You should get rid of this before it makes your life more difficult. You're not getting any younger, and pregnancy at your age can be risky. I looked at them, and a numbness grew inside me, turning into anger. I expected questions, concern, perhaps even disappointment, but not such immediate pressure, not such cold calculation, where emotions had no place, only logic and common sense, under which they tried to hide the fear of change. What about his family? Melissa interjected, folding her arms over her chest and looking at me intently. You don't know anything about him at all. What if he had health problems? What if the child has some kind of genetic mutation? The baby, I said slowly, emphasizing each word, is going to be fine. You can't know that. Mom said sharply, an impatient note appeared in her voice. Sharon, be reasonable, this is not how you planned your life. Life is about change, I replied, feeling anger rise inside me. I thought you would support me. It's not fair, Mom shook her head. We're worried about you. No, you're worried about yourself. My voice became firmer, louder, and I felt my face flush. I stood up, pushing my chair back so abruptly that it creaked on the floor. I'm having this baby. With or without your support. If you can't accept this, then maybe we need to distance ourselves from each other. Don't be dramatic, my father raised his hand, as if trying to stop me. Sit down and let's discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss, I said, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. I thought that a family should stick together, no matter what. Apparently, I was wrong. I got out without turning around, and tears blurred my eyes as I started the car. As I drove along a deserted night street, a hurricane of resentment, pain, and anger raged inside. They'll call when they calm down, I told myself. They will digest the news, and it will become easier for them. The next morning, the phone rang. Sharon, dear, Mom's voice sounded soft, cautious, almost apologetic. I'm sorry about last night. We were shocked. I was silent, waiting for her to say more. We were just worried. That's all. But you're right, it's your decision. Let's forget about what happened and move on. I hesitated, feeling the aftertaste of yesterday's resentment, but then I took a deep breath. Okay, Mom. See you at Sunday dinner? Yes, I'll be there. The following weeks were difficult. Morning sickness wasn't just limited to the morning. I felt sick all day, and I could barely hold down food. Weakness came in waves, my head was spinning, and any attempt to concentrate was difficult. After 2 weeks of torment, Richard, my boss, called me into the office. Sharon, he looked at me with obvious concern. I've noticed that you haven't been yourself lately. Something happened? I wasn't going to tell anyone at work yet, but his worried look and sincere sympathy broke my resolve. I sighed and briefly explained the situation. I understand, he said, nodding, and there was no condemnation in his voice, just warmth. Then, first of all, congratulations. And secondly, you have to take care of yourself. I can't take a vacation, I have projects, clients. Projects are not going anywhere, he stopped me by raising his palm. Take unpaid leave if necessary, but you need to rest. In the end, I agreed. I had enough savings to afford a few months without income. Mom and Melissa began to visit me regularly, bringing groceries, homemade soup, warm blankets and magazines, but in their care I felt not only a desire to help, but also something else, an anxious tension that they tried to hide, but which I felt in every glance, in every carefully worded question, in every the doubt that flashed across their faces. If only you would listen to us, you wouldn't suffer so much, Mom said, plumping the pillows on my couch, as if this could ease my fatigue, my aching back, my permanent feeling of exhaustion. It was worth it, I replied, closing my eyes and trying not to get annoyed. Melissa was more direct than Mom, and unlike her, she didn't even try to soften her words or give them a hint of sympathy. I'm not sure how you're going to handle the loans, she said, sinking onto the edge of the couch and folding her arms across her chest. Children are expensive, demanding, and you're alone, and to be honest, it's not like you usually plan everything carefully. I've been saving up for years, I reminded her, feeling irritation rise in my throat. I have enough money to cover maternity leave and not worry about the financial side of the issue. She just shrugged, but there was disbelief mixed with something else in her gaze, perhaps with a growing concern that I might no longer be the financial resource she was used to. One afternoon, when my mother was making tea in my kitchen, the smell of mint filled the apartment, and I already knew that something serious was going to follow. She always brewed mint when she wanted to soften the conversation, make it less harsh. Sharon, she said hesitantly, stirring the sugar in her cup with a spoon. Your father and I were thinking about paying off the mortgage next month. I looked up from my cup, already anticipating where this conversation was heading. Don't worry, I tried to speak softly, because I knew that otherwise there would be resentment in her voice. I have set up automatic transfers. I can still help you with the bills. Her relief was almost physically palpable, the tension in her shoulders eased, and her lips formed a grateful smile. Oh, thank God, she muttered, and after a moment, she added, Is Melissa's rent okay, too? I told you I was prepared for this, I reminded him. She hugged me, hugging me tightly, warmly, and for a moment I felt like a little girl again, to whom my mother had promised that everything would be fine. But when she left that day, a strange, unpleasant thought stuck in my head. Was her concern sincere? Or was she just worried about the financial support I was giving them all? But I pushed away these doubts. They are my family, of course, they take care of me. My pregnancy dragged on through seasons of discomfort, morning sickness, which, contrary to the name, tormented me all day, eventually subsided, but it was replaced by back pain, swollen legs, and chronic fatigue, from which even the soundest sleep could not save. But with every ultrasound, with every tiny push from the inside, I felt that I had made the right choice. At the 20th week, the doctor smiled at the screen. You have a boy, she said. Congratulations. I looked at the blurred outlines on the monitor, at the tiny fingers, at the tiny heartbeat, and warmth spread in my chest. I'm going to have a son, I repeated, barely audibly, as if tasting the words. I asked Melissa to come with me that day, hoping that it would awaken at least a little enthusiasm in her, that after seeing him, hearing his heart, she would finally get into it as much as I did. She was sitting next to me, staring at the screen with an unreadable expression on her face. Isn't that amazing? I asked, pointing to the perfect outline of his profile. She muttered, and immediately changed the subject. So have you already talked to the HR department about maternity leave? The question under her question was obvious. How long will I be out of work? How long will my income be less than usual? I'll take the standard 12 weeks, but I can work remotely for some of them, I replied, adjusting my shirt over my growing belly. Don't worry, I can still help with your rent. She looked embarrassed, as if she had been caught doing something awkward. That's not what I meant. But we both knew that was exactly what she meant. The closer the date of birth was, the more I felt my life changing. I turned the second bedroom into a nursery. I painted the walls a pale blue color, put a white crib, and chose a comfortable rocking chair located by the window with a view of the city lights. Sometimes I sat there, stroked my stomach and talked to my son, telling him about what life awaits us. It's just you and me, buddy, I whispered. But we'll be fine. The birth started 2 weeks early. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The day was no different from others, until suddenly the waters broke. I called an Uber to the hospital, and from the back seat I texted my mom, Dad, and Melissa that the baby should arrive sooner. Mom was the first to arrive at the hospital, followed by her father and Melissa. They sat in the waiting room while the contractions squeezed me tighter and tighter, while the hours turned into torture, while I screamed and clutched the sheets, while my life was bursting at the seams from pain, fear, and inevitability. They sent me messages asking how things were going, but no one offered to come in, hold my hand, or be there for me when I needed support the most. 16 o'clock. 16 grueling, exhausting hours. And then, a deafening scream. My son was born, his face was red, his tiny lungs were tearing the air with a victorious cry of life. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, the nurse announced. He's perfect. I named him Ethan Michael Mitchell, after his father, a man who may never know that he has a son somewhere on the other side of the country. The first visits of my family after Ethan's birth left me with a strange, heavy feeling, as if I expected something more, some depth of emotion, but received only the usual gestures and polite presents. Mom held him in her arms for no more than a couple of minutes, looking at his small face, and, smiling slightly, said, "He's got your nose." There was not the tenderness in her voice that I had hoped to hear, nor was there the delight that grandmothers feel when they see their grandson for the first time. She said it as if she was just noting a fact, nothing more. Dad stood aside, slightly hunched over, looking at his grandson with an expression of confusion, as if he didn't know what to do with him, what to say, how to react. Melissa took a few pictures on her phone, chose the best one, uploaded it to Instagram, added the caption, "Welcome baby Ethan," checked the number of likes and only then deigned to look at me. "It's such a stupid parking lot here," she complained. I spent 10 minutes trying to find a place. They stayed in the room for less than 20 minutes. Then Mom got up from her chair, adjusted her purse on her shoulder and said, "We have to go. You'd better get some rest too." The door closed behind them, and I was left alone, in silence, with a warm lump on my chest, with my son's soft breathing close to my heart. I looked at his sleeping face, stroked his tiny palm, and whispered, "We'll show them how wonderful you are." The first weeks of motherhood flew by in a kind of hazy, exhausting whirlwind, where sleepless nights were replaced by endless diaper changes, where anxiety for every breath of the child was juxtaposed with unusual, unlike happiness. There were moments of pure horror when I doubted my every action. I was afraid to do something wrong, to hold him incorrectly, not to hear his crying, not to understand why he was crying. But there were also moments that made my heart ache, his first real smile, his first conscious movement in my direction, the way he wrapped his whole tiny palm around my finger, clinging to me as if I were the whole world to him. Mom visited me, but always with some excuse for why she couldn't stay long or why she couldn't look after Ethan, even for a short time. "My arthritis is getting worse," she said when I asked her to hold him. "I'm not sure I can hold it properly." "We have a book club meeting today," she explained another time. "I can't miss it, they've been waiting for me for a long time." After 6 weeks of this, I finally couldn't stand it. "Mom, I really need help," I said one evening when she was about to leave. "I haven't slept for more than 3 hours straight since he was born." She looked uncomfortable, as if she wished this conversation wouldn't happen. Sharon, your father and I are too old to chase after a child, she said carefully. We have already raised our children. I'm not asking you to raise him, Mom, I replied wearily. I just need you to sit with him for a couple of hours sometimes so I can at least take a shower or sleep. She pursed her lips, looked down, and then said, Why don't you hire a babysitter? You can afford it. And there was the same expectation in her words that was always in the air, that I can afford to solve all my problems with money. The same money that supported them. I didn't argue. The next day, I called the nanny recruitment agency and arranged for help for a few days a week. When my maternity leave was coming to an end, I discussed the possibility of a flexible schedule with Richard, and I was allowed to work from home 2 days a week. On the rest of the days, Nanny Maria came to look after Ethan. It wasn't perfect, but we managed. I was exhausted most of the time, balancing between conference calls, reports, project deadlines, and at the same time trying not to miss a single important moment in my son's development. And the family has set a pattern of polite distance. They asked about Ethan during phone conversations, but their involvement in his life was more nominal. Sunday dinners at my parents' house resumed, but there were never any toys or children's food. They tolerated his presence, but did not welcome him. He's so active, Mom complained one day, when Ethan, who had already learned to crawl, explored the living room, curiously touching the legs of chairs and the carpet. Can't you keep him in one place? Mom, I replied, looking at her in disbelief. He's a baby, not a houseplant. The pattern was repeated from month to month. Ethan turned from a baby into a toddler, took his first steps, said his first words. He grew, changed, and developed, but the family remained invariably distant, as if there was an invisible barrier that they did not want to cross. By his second birthday, I had already stopped expecting them to ever change. But she kept inviting them anyway. I kept hoping. When Ethan was 3 years old, he began to notice a difference in the way people treated him. Gamma is evil? What is it? He asked one Sunday evening after his mother had irritably yelled at him for touching a crystal figurine on the coffee table. No, honey, Grandma's just worried about her things, I replied, trying to make my voice light, although everything inside was squeezed by the unpleasant realization that he already felt someone else's displeasure. But he was perceptive, my boy, too smart for his age, too good at reading the mood of others. He stopped trying to hug my father after he pulled away several times, awkwardly patting him on the head instead of hugging him like I did. He began to cling to me at family gatherings, clutching my sleeve, hiding behind my leg, although in kindergarten or next to Nanny Maria he was brave, smiling, confident. And then, one of the usual weekday evenings, Melissa showed up at my apartment without warning. I sat at my desk, looking through work documents, while Ethan played with cubes in the living room, building a shaky tower out of them, his tongue stuck out in concentration. Hey, she said, coming inside and giving me a quick hug. Do you have a minute to talk? Of course, I put down the papers, smiled. Is something wrong? No, on the contrary, great news, excitement flashed in her eyes. Jake and I have finally set a date for the wedding. That's great. I was genuinely delighted. When is this important day? June 15th, she said, beaming. We found the perfect place. It's a new event space with a view of the harbor, and I've already chosen my dress. That sounds amazing, I smiled. I'm happy for you. I am honored to be a part of your special day. Melissa cleared her throat and looked away, as if she was about to say something she was uncomfortable voicing. Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, she began slowly. I nodded, assuming that she wanted to ask me to help with the organization, maybe handle some details related to the preparation. Sure, I said. What do you want? She hesitated, and then, taking a deep breath, exhaled it all in one sentence. We've calculated everything: the venue, the catering, the flowers, the dress, the photographer, and it comes out to about $70,000. I almost choked on my coffee. 70,000? It's not that much, she said hurriedly, defending herself. Actually, it's quite reasonable for a real wedding these days. I stared at her in silence, feeling an unpleasant chill run down my spine. Anyway, we were hoping that you could help us financially, she continued, avoiding my gaze. I mean, you've always been successful. I slowly put the cup down on the table so as not to spill the coffee, and finally I spoke. Melissa, this is way more than I can afford. I have a child now, I have expenses, savings for his education, and my own pension. She looked at Ethan, who at that moment dropped the cubes and began to collect them with laughter, and something like irritation flashed in her eyes for a second. All right, she said coldly, getting up. I'll talk to Jake, see what we can come up with. As she headed for the door, her goodbye to Ethan was so casual that he didn't even notice her leaving. I watched her go, and unease grew inside me. Something has changed. And I wasn't sure if everything would be the same as before. The next week was strangely quiet. Mom didn't call to check on us. There was not a single text message from Melissa about the wedding, not a single link to the dress, not a single question about which flowers to choose. I didn't know if I should have written to them first, but I was too busy with work and Ethan to dwell on it. And then, on Friday evening, I was scrolling through the feed on my phone and saw a new photo on Melissa's Instagram: champagne glasses, a snow-white tablecloth, candles on the table. Caption: family dinner tomorrow night. I can't wait. I frowned at the screen. No one invited me. I opened my messenger and typed a short message to my mom. Dinner tomorrow night? It took 3 hours before she answered. Oh, it's just a small thing. I didn't think you'd want to invite Ethan so late. I reread her words several times. It was a shaky excuse. Our family dinners always started at 6 p.m., long before Ethan went to bed. I was deliberately excluded. Okay. Hi, I replied, not wanting to start an argument. I wasn't going to sort things out. Let them have dinner without me, let them pretend that I'm no longer part of the family, let them think they can just cut Ethan and me out of their lives if it's more convenient for them. I'm tired of proving my worth, trying to earn a place at their table. I was bathing Ethan on Saturday night when my phone vibrated, signaling a new message. It was from Melissa, the video. I assumed it was something sweet that she wanted to share, maybe a recording of a wedding dress or a sample of a wedding cake, or even something funny related to our parents. I opened the message while Ethan was happily splashing around in the warm water, laughing as I hummed to him. The video showed my parents' dining room. The camera was shaking, as if whoever was holding it had already drunk several glasses. My family was sitting at the table. Wine glasses were raised, faces were flushed, and a warm, festive atmosphere filled the air. To us, my father said, raising his glass. For the family, Mom said. And then Melissa's voice rang out, slightly slurred, with a hint of mockery. Speaking of family, have you noticed how Sharon has changed since this baby was born? I froze. God, yes, his father grumbled. She doesn't spend a cent on anyone but him. Do you remember when she was generous? Mom sighed. Now all I hear is, I need to save for Ethan's college, or Ethan needs new shoes, Melissa complained. 30,000, she added with obvious irritation. That's all she gave me for the wedding. She was much more useful before this burden came. I felt like something was squeezing inside of me, like my heart was sinking deeper and deeper with every word they said. It would have been better if she had listened to us initially, Mom said. Her words made me freeze. If she had just gotten rid of it when we told her, everything would have been fine. Dad nodded. That kid ruined everything. She's not the same person she was before him. Melissa laughed, raising her glass, and everyone else joined in the toast. The video is over. I sat motionless, staring at the screen, unable to even blink. Tears rolled down my cheeks, hot, silent, dull with pain. Ethan splashed water on me, laughing, not noticing my grief, not understanding what had just happened. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Melissa. Jake, you have to see this, it's hilarious. I blinked at him. She sent me the video by mistake. It was meant for her fiancé. I quickly saved it, and then noticed that it had disappeared from the chat. Melissa deleted it. She realized her mistake. But it was too late. The next morning, my phone rang. Hi, little sister. Melissa said too cheerfully. How are you and Ethan doing? Great, I tried to keep my voice even, neutral. Why do you ask? No reason, just checking, she replied with a casual lightness that now seemed fake to me. Then she paused. So what about this money for the wedding? I closed my eyes, fighting the revulsion. I'll translate it soon, I said. Don't worry. Great. You're the best. We'll talk later. She hung up, and I knew she was relieved because I hadn't mentioned the video. But I had no intention of sending her money. Instead, I logged into my banking app. First, I canceled the automatic transfers to my parents' mortgage account. Then I deleted the regular payment for their utilities. And finally, she stopped the transfer of Melissa's apartment rent. It took them a week to notice. On Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. Sharon. Her voice was anxious, almost panicked. The bank called us. They said our mortgage payment is overdue. There must be some mistake with your translation. I calmly put the phone on the table, turned on the speakerphone, and, continuing to rock Ethan, who was beginning to fall asleep in my arms, I answered in a flat voice. No mistake. I calmly replied that I had stopped payments. I also canceled Melissa's utility bills and rent, I added, holding the phone steady, without the slightest tremor in my voice. In the silence that followed, I could hear the creak of the chair I was sitting in, rocking Ethan. Sharon, we need this money, Mom finally spoke, and there was no resentment or anger in her voice, but real, overwhelming fear. We can't afford it. It's not my problem anymore, I replied, looking out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. What's gotten into you? Mom raised her voice, and now there was irritation in it, almost hysteria. Is it because we didn't invite you to dinner? It was Melissa's idea, not mine. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I have to go, Mom. Ethan needs me. I hung up before she could answer. The next day, there was a loud knock on my door. I was startled by a sudden sound and, looking through the peephole, saw my parents and Melissa on the threshold. All three of them looked angry, tense, their faces twisted with indignation. I didn't have to open it. I could just pretend that we're not at home. But I'm tired of the innuendos, tired of their lies, tired of their ability to pass off their own mistakes as someone else's. I opened the door and they literally rushed in. What the hell, Sharon? Melissa screamed so loudly that Ethan clung to me in fright. My landlord said I was overdue. I remained calm. I'd like to show you something, I said, pulling out my phone. They froze when I opened the video and pressed the play button. I watched their faces, as the expression of anger turned to realization, then to shame, and finally to cold anger. When the recording ended, there was a long silence in the room. Melissa spoke first. You shouldn't have seen this, she muttered. I saw it very clearly, I replied. We were just letting off steam, Mom tried to explain. We drank too much wine. I pressed my lips together. You called my son a burden, I said flatly. You said that you wish he had never been born. You called me greedy for not giving you more money. You've changed since you got him. Melissa blurted out. Of course, I looked at her with cold determination. He's my child. What about us? Mom sobbed, her eyes filled with tears. We're your family too. You've always helped us. I helped, I nodded. Because I thought that's what a family does. But now I see that I was wrong. A real family supports each other unconditionally. So you're just going to let us fight? There was a note of disbelief in his father's voice. You're both healthy enough to work, I shrugged. Melissa could have found a cheaper apartment. You're cruel, his sister said. No, I replied calmly. I'm setting boundaries. And I'm not going to let Ethan grow up around people who resent his existence. It's because of the money, Mom insisted. You're punishing us because we're asking for help. I shook my head. It's about respect and love, which you have shown neither to me nor to my son. Melissa abruptly grabbed her purse. Leave your money, she said. But don't expect us to keep pretending that we're one big happy family. Oh, I don't expect anything more from you. I folded my arms across my chest. They left, slamming the door. Over the next few weeks, they tried to contact me. Calls, texts, even a letter from my mom, full of remorse, begging me to change my mind. I blocked their numbers and returned the email unopened. Through mutual acquaintances, I found out that my mother had found a part-time job to help with the bills, and my father had started working as a driver for a taxi-sharing company. Melissa moved back in with them, and her wedding was postponed indefinitely. For a few nights, I wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I looked at Ethan, sleeping peacefully next to me, his tiny fingers squeezing my finger. His breathing was steady, calm, full of trust. He was innocent. He was perfect. I made the right choice. 6 months later, I got a promotion at work. To celebrate, I took Ethan to the park. We ran through the green grass, laughed, played catch-up, and ate ice cream until sticky drops trickled down our fingers. Just us, buddy, I said as he climbed onto my lap, yawning tiredly. Just us, he repeated, smiling at me. I love you, Mommy, he murmured, resting his head on my shoulder. I love you too, honey, I whispered, kissing the top of his head. More than anything in the world. And at that moment, I realized that we were going to be fine. We were at each other's place. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.